I stood at the altar staring at an empty front row seat reserved for my mother. Unaware my brother was posting selfies with her from a so-called emergency across town. 3 months later, at Christmas dinner, I slid an envelope across the table. My mother smiled until she read the words, "Final notice." My brother reached for it like a live wire, recognizing the invoice number, right before Grandma asked why his wedding date was on my bill. My name is Harper Watson, and I'm 34 years old. I live in Madison, Wisconsin, where the winters are long enough to freeze the sentimentality right out of your bones, and I work as a contract compliance auditor for one of the largest healthcare systems in the Midwest. My job is not particularly glamorous, but it suits the way my brain is wired. I do not deal in gray areas. I do not deal in he said, she said. I deal in documentation. I look for variances in the ledger. I look for the places where the story people tell does not match the paper trail they leave behind. When a surgeon claims they were in 2 operating rooms at the same time, I am the one who pulls the logs and proves that physics does not work that way. I am the one who finds the uncomfortable truth buried under layers of corporate politeness. And tonight, I was treating my family dinner exactly like a field audit. It was Christmas Eve in Savannah, Georgia. The air outside was heavy and humid, a stark contrast to the biting cold I had left behind in Wisconsin. But inside my mother's house, the temperature felt artificially regulated, chilled by something that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The house was decorated to an inch of its life. My mother, Denise, had wrapped the banister in fresh garland that smelled of pine and expensive floral preservation spray. The Christmas tree in the corner was a towering masterpiece of gold and cream ornaments, shimmering under the soft glow of 1,000 tiny white lights. It was the kind of scene that belonged on the front of a greeting card, projecting an image of warmth, unity, and generational wealth. But I knew better. I sat at the dining table, watching the candlelight flicker against the crystal wine glasses, and I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, hard resolve. My husband, Ethan, sat next to me. His hand was resting on my knee under the table, a silent signal of support, or perhaps a plea for restraint. He knew what was in my bag. He knew why we had flown halfway across the country when every instinct in my body screamed to stay home. We were playing a part. Everyone at this table was playing a part. My mother was at the head of the table, radiating a frantic sort of hospitality. She was passing the platter of honey-glazed ham. Her smile stretched so tight, I worried her foundation might crack. "Harper, honey, you have barely touched your food," she said, her voice dripping with that thick, sugary Southern accent that she dialed up whenever she felt threatened. "You look so thin. Does Ethan not feed you up there in the frozen north?" "I am fine, Mom," I said, my voice steady, "just not very hungry." Across from me sat my brother, Nolan, the golden boy. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, and he was currently scrolling through his phone under the table, thinking he was being subtle. He wasn't. Nolan had never had to be subtle because he had never had to face a consequence in his entire life. 3 months ago, on the day that was supposed to be the most important day of my life, my mother had left an empty chair in the front row of my wedding ceremony to rush to Nolan's side for a family emergency. That emergency, as I later found out through the geotags on his Instagram stories, had taken place at a luxury sports bar where the draft beer list was apparently critical to his survival. Yet here we were, the family unit, intact, allegedly. "So," Nolan said, finally putting his phone down and picking up his fork, "Mom says you guys are thinking about buying a new place in Madison. Interest rates are killer right now. You sure that is smart?" The audacity of him giving financial advice was almost laughable, but I kept my face neutral. "We are managing," I said. "We stick to a budget. We pay our bills on time." The air in the room shifted slightly, a microscopic change in pressure. "Well, that is good," my mother interjected quickly, sensing the edge in my tone. "We are just so glad you made it down. I know things have been busy, but Christmas is for family. It is time to put everything else behind us." That was her favorite phrase. Put it behind us. It was code for, let me get away with whatever I want and never mention it again. I agree, I said, reaching down to the tote bag I had placed by my feet. I think it is definitely time we cleared the air. In fact, I brought something to help us do that. The clinking of silverware stopped. Ethan's hand tightened on my knee. But I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on my mother. I pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. It wasn't wrapped in festive paper. It was stark white, with a clear plastic window on the front. I placed it on the table, right next to the crystal gravy boat. The sound of the paper sliding against the polished mahogany was the loudest noise in the room. "What is this?" Denise asked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she tried to recover. "A gift card. You know I prefer meaningful gifts, Harper, but it is not a gift card," I said. I slid the envelope across the table until it rested directly in front of her. The return address in the top left corner was bold in black Magnolia Cove Estate, accounts receivable, and just below that, stamped in aggressive red ink, final notice venue. Balance due. My mother's eyes flicked down to the envelope. I watched her pupils contract. She recognized the logo. Of course she did. She had spent hours on the phone with them, allegedly coordinating the payment that was supposed to be her contribution to my wedding. "Harper," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its sugary coating. "Now is not the time for business. We are eating dinner." "Actually, I think now is the perfect time," I replied, leaning forward slightly. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. This was the moment the audit began. "You see, I received this in the mail 3 days ago. It is a collections warning." Nolan, who had been reaching for a roll, froze, his eyes locked onto the logo on the envelope. His face, usually flushed with the confidence of mediocrity, drained of color. "Collections." Denise let out a breathless, nervous laugh. She waved her hand dismissively, but she didn't touch the envelope. "Oh, honey, that must be a clerical error. You know how these automated systems are. I told you, I handled everything. I took care of the venue. That was my gift to you and Ethan." "That is what you said," I agreed. "You said you wired the funds. You said it was paid in full 6 weeks before the wedding. You even told me not to worry about the final invoice because you had it sent directly to your email so I wouldn't stress." "And I did," she insisted, looking around the table as if seeking a witness to her own delusion. "I paid it. This is just a mistake. Put it away. Harper, we will call them on Tuesday when they open. Do not ruin Christmas with administrative nonsense." "It is not administrative nonsense. Mom, it is $25,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. "I am not going to wait until Tuesday," I continued, my voice hard, because when I called them to ask why I was being threatened with legal action, they told me something very interesting. They told me the balance was never paid. They told me that the funds were transferred. Nolan made a sudden movement. He reached out, his hand darting across the table toward the envelope. "Let me see that," he snapped. "It is probably just a scam. You know how much phishing mail people get these days." His fingers were inches from the paper when I slammed my hand down on top of it. "Do not touch it, Nolan," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. He flinched, pulling his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. He looked at me, then at Mom, panic dancing in his eyes. "Mom," Nolan said, his voice cracking. "Mom, tell her to put it away." "Harper, please," Denise hissed. The mask was slipping completely now. The charming Southern matriarch was gone, replaced by the desperate woman who had spent her life juggling lies to keep her favorite son on a pedestal. "We can discuss this in private, later, not in front of everyone." "No," I said. "We are discussing it now, because I am the one with a collections agency breathing down my neck. I am the one whose credit score is about to tank because of a contract signed in my name." I picked up the envelope and opened the flap. I didn't need to look at the papers inside. I had memorized every line, every code, every timestamp. I pulled out the summary statement and unfolded it. "You told me you paid for my wedding venue," I said to my mother. And according to the venue's internal logs, money did come into the account. But then, on September 12th, 2 weeks before my wedding, it was moved. "Moved," Ethan spoke up for the first time. His voice was calm, but I knew him well enough to hear the fury underneath. "Moved where?" "Denise." My mother refused to look at him. She was staring at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her fork. I needed to reallocate some liquidity," she stammered. "It is complicated. Business accounts, trust funds. You do not understand how these things work." "Harper, I understand exactly how they work," I cut her off. "I audit billion-dollar ledgers for a living. Mom, I know what a fund transfer looks like, and I know what theft looks like." "It is not theft," she cried out, slamming her hand on the table. The wine glasses rattled. "It is family. I did what I had to do. Nolan had an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime investment, and he needed the capital immediately or he was going to lose the chance. I was going to put it back. I just needed a little more time." "So you took the money for my wedding venue," I said, clarifying the facts for the record. "And you gave it to Nolan." "I didn't take it," she insisted. "I just borrowed against the deposit. I was going to fix it before anyone noticed." "But you didn't fix it," I said. "You skipped my wedding because you couldn't face me. You made up an emergency so you wouldn't have to look me in the eye when the venue coordinator asked for the final check. And now, 3 months later, I am holding the bill." Nolan was staring at the tablecloth, refusing to meet my gaze. "I didn't know," he mumbled. "I thought it was her money. I didn't know it was yours." "Stop lying, Nolan," I said. "You knew exactly where that money came from, but that is not even the worst part." I smoothed the invoice out on the table, turning it so that the text faced them. "I could almost understand the money," I said. "I know you have always prioritized him. I have made peace with the fact that I am the backup child. But what I cannot understand, what I cannot wrap my head around is the sheer stupidity of the paper trail you left behind." "What are you talking about?" Denise whispered. She looked sick. "I asked the venue why I was receiving a final notice if the account was in arrears for 3 months, I said. They told me they had been sending notices to the email on file, but it wasn't my email. Someone had accessed the portal and changed the contact information. Someone tried to hide the debt." I looked at my brother. He was sweating now, a fine sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. "But here's the thing about corporate accounting systems," I said, leaning back in my chair, allowing the silence to stretch, tight and suffocating. "They track everything, every change, every login, and every reallocation of funds." I pointed a manicured finger at the bottom of the invoice, right next to the total balance due. "Mom, you said you paid for my wedding. You said you just moved the money temporarily." I looked her dead in the eye. "So explain to me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "why the venue transferred my deposit to a new event contract, and explain to me why, on this invoice for my unpaid balance, the reallocation code is linked to a reservation for next June with Nolan's name on it." The room went deathly silent. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Denise stopped breathing. Nolan stopped moving. "That's right," I said. "You didn't just steal my money to pay his debts. You used my wedding deposit to book his wedding venue." 3 months before that Christmas dinner, on a humid afternoon in late September, I was standing in the bridal suite of the Magnolia Cove Estate in South Carolina. The venue was breathtaking, exactly the kind of place you book 18 months in advance. It sat right on the water, framed by ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss that swayed in the breeze like tattered gray lace. The air smelled of salt water and jasmine. Everything was perfect. Everything was running exactly according to the schedule I had color-coded in my binder. The florist had arrived at 10 in the morning. The photographer was capturing the detail shots of the rings. My bridesmaids were laughing, drinking mimosas, and steaming their dresses. The only thing missing was the mother of the bride. I kept checking my phone. It sat on the vanity table amidst a clutter of hairspray cans and bobby pins, its screen dark and silent. My mother had told me she was driving up from Savannah that morning. It was only a 2-hour drive. She should have been there by noon to help me into my dress. At 1 in the afternoon. I sent a text. Are you close? We start photos in an hour. No reply. At 1:30, I called. It went straight to voicemail. My maid of honor, Sarah, tried to distract me. She poured me another glass of champagne and made a joke about southern traffic, but I could see the worry tightening the corners of her eyes. She knew my family history. She knew that my mother's reliability was a variable, not a constant, but this was my wedding day. There are certain social contracts you just do not break, and showing up for your daughter's wedding is at the very top of that list. At 2:00, just as the hairstylist was pinning the final curl into place, my phone buzzed. I snatched it up so fast I nearly knocked over a bottle of perfume. It was a text from Mom. Something came up with Nolan. Emergency. Can't make it. Love you. I stared at the screen. The words blurred and swam before my eyes. Can't make it. Not I am running late. Not I will be there for the reception. Just can't make it. As if she were declining an invitation to a casual brunch or a movie night, rather than the most significant day of my adult life. My hands started to shake. I typed back, my fingers clumsy against the glass. What emergency is he okay, Mom? The ceremony starts in 2 hours. Nothing. The 3 little dots that indicate typing never appeared. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a FaceTime request from Nolan. I accepted the call, desperate for information. I expected to see the fluorescent lights of an emergency room, or perhaps the chaotic background of a roadside accident scene. I expected to see blood, or bandages, or at least a look of genuine fear. Instead, I saw my brother's face filling the screen. He looked flushed, yes, but not from trauma. He looked sweaty. The sun was beating down on him, bright and harsh. Hey, Harper, he said. The connection was spotty, the video pixelating every few seconds. Look, I am really sorry. Things are crazy right now. Where are you? I asked. My voice sounded thin, foreign to my own ears. Mom said it was an emergency. Are you hurt? No. I am fine, he said quickly, glancing off camera to his right. It is just a situation, a personal thing. Mom is helping me handle it. You know how she is. I looked past him, analyzing the background data. I saw asphalt. I saw the bumper of a large black truck, and in the distance, blurry but unmistakable, I saw a green awning that looked like the patio of a bar or a restaurant. There were no sirens. There were no doctors. There was just the ambient noise of traffic and wind. Nolan, I said, today is my wedding. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he had used since he was 10 years old whenever he was caught doing something he shouldn't. I know, Harp, I know. It sucks. But you understand. Right, family first. We will make it up to you. Family first. I repeated. I gotta go, he said. Mom is calling me. Have a good one. Tell Ethan congrats. The screen went black. Have a good one. I sat there in my silk robe, the silence of the bridal suite pressing in on me. The laughter from the bridesmaids in the other room felt like it was happening on a different planet. I put the phone down. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was flawless. My hair was perfect, and I looked like the loneliest person in the world. I didn't cry. Crying would ruin the makeup, and we were on a tight schedule. I simply stood up, walked to the door, and told my bridesmaids it was time to get dressed. I told them my mother and brother had car trouble and couldn't make it. It was a lie, but it was a cleaner, more digestible lie than the truth. The truth was too jagged to swallow. The ceremony began at 4 in the afternoon. Walking down the aisle is supposed to be a moment of triumph. You are walking toward your future. But as I took those steps, clutching my bouquet of white roses so hard the stems snapped in my grip, all I could see was the empty seat in the front row. It was the first chair on the left. We had placed a small reserved sign on it, written in elegant calligraphy on heavy cardstock, Mother of the Bride. That empty chair felt like a physical object, dense and heavy, possessing its own gravitational pull. It sucked the air out of the space around it. Every time I glanced toward the guests, my eyes were dragged back to it. It was a gap in the smile of the day, a missing tooth. I could feel the guests looking at it. I could feel their confusion radiating toward me like heat waves. They whispered to each other behind their programs. "Where is Denise? Is everything okay?" That is so sad. I stood at the altar and held Ethan's hands. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes full of love and concern. He squeezed my fingers, trying to ground me, trying to keep me present in the moment. I said my vows. I promised to love and cherish him. I promised to be his partner. But inside my head, a single question was looping over and over again, drowning out the officiant's words. Why? Why today? Why? After 34 years of being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never asked for money or help, did I not rate high enough to warrant attendance at my own wedding? What kind of emergency allows for a phone call from a sunny parking lot but prevents a 2-hour drive? I kissed my husband. The guests cheered. We walked back up the aisle, showered in white petals. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I played the part. I was Harper Watson, the radiant bride. I was not Harper Watson, the abandoned daughter. The cracks started to widen during the cocktail hour. We were taking photos near the marsh. The photographer was trying to arrange the family portraits. This was the moment I had dreaded. "Okay, let's get the bride's parents," the photographer chirped, checking her list. "My father passed away," I said, my voice steady. "And my mother couldn't make it." The photographer paused. Her camera lowered. "Oh, I am so sorry. Okay, let's just do the groom's family then." I stepped out of the frame. I stood by myself on the edge of the grass, watching Ethan with his parents and his sisters. They were laughing. His mother was fixing his tie. His father had his arm around Ethan's shoulder. They looked like a unit, solid, unbreakable. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I thought I might faint. It wasn't just sadness, it was humiliation. It was the realization that I was standing alone at my own celebration, an orphan by choice, not by circumstance. Then, the first financial red flag appeared. I was heading toward the reception tent when a woman with a clipboard intercepted me. It was the venue coordinator, a nice woman named Jessica, who had been helpful throughout the process. She looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Pierce," she said, using my new name. "I am so sorry to bother you right now. I know this is not the time." "What is it?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "It is just a small issue with the final balance," she said, lowering her voice so the guests nearby wouldn't hear. "We never received the final wire transfer. I am sure it is just a banking delay, but my manager is asking for a credit card just to hold on file until the wire clears. Policy, you know." I frowned. "My mother handled that. She told me she sent the wire 2 weeks ago." "I see," Jessica said, looking down at her clipboard. "Well, our accounts receivable team shows the balance is still outstanding, and there was a note about a change in the billing contact. But, look, do not worry about it tonight. If you can just give me a card for the incidentals, we can sort out the rest on Monday." I gave her my card. I didn't think much of it at the time. My brain was too full of the emotional wreckage to process the logistics. I assumed Mom had simply forgotten, or the bank had made an error. It never occurred to me, not even for a second, that the money wasn't there. The reception was a blur of speeches and dancing. I drank more champagne than I usually would. I danced with my college friends. I ate the cake. But every time I looked at the head table, I saw the empty space next to me. Ethan was amazing. He never left my side. He fielded questions from nosy relatives. He made sure my glass was full. Later in the evening, we sat for a moment at our sweetheart table, watching the party. "You okay?" he asked, leaning in close so I could hear him over the band. "I am fine," I lied. He took my hand and kissed the palm. "You do not have to be fine. Harper, what they did today, it is unforgivable." I looked at him, and the tears I had been holding back finally threatened to spill over. "I just do not understand what was more important than this. Nolan looked fine. Ethan, he was standing in a parking lot. I know, Ethan said grimly. I saw the screenshot you took. It looked like the tailgating lot at the stadium. I felt a cold chill. The stadium. There was a game today, Ethan said. State versus Tech. It is a big one. I stared at him. The idea was so monstrous I couldn't fully accept it. You think she missed my wedding to go to a football game with him, I think? Ethan said carefully. That with your family, nothing is off the table. That realization hit me harder than the empty chair. It wasn't just that they weren't there, it was that they might be somewhere trivial, somewhere fun. While I was standing here, feeling like a piece of my heart had been carved out, they were potentially eating nachos and cheering for a touchdown. The reception ended at 11. We did the sparkler exit. We got into the vintage car we had rented. We drove to the cottage on the property where we were staying for the night. Ethan went into the bathroom to shower. I stayed in the main room. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, still wearing my wedding dress. The hem was stained with grass and dirt. The lace was starting to itch. I looked at the woman in the mirror. I looked like a bride, but I felt like a fool. I picked up my phone one last time. It was past midnight. The day was over. My wedding day was gone, and it would never come back. There was one new message from my mother. Hope it was beautiful. So sorry we missed it. Nolan is okay now. Talk later. Talk later. 2 words that dismissed my pain, dismissed my anger, and dismissed the monumental nature of her absence. There was no explanation, no groveling apology, just a casual sign-off, as if she had missed a weekly phone call instead of the most expensive and emotional day of my life. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the layers of tulle crinkling around me. The silence in the room was absolute. Outside, the crickets were singing in the dark, indifferent to my grief. I realized then that the empty seat wasn't just an empty seat. It was a symbol of my new reality. I had walked down the aisle hoping to add a husband to my family, but I had ended up subtracting a mother and a brother. The severance had happened. It wasn't official yet. I didn't have the paperwork or the audits or the proof of fraud that I would find later, but the emotional contract had been voided. They had breached the terms of our relationship. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen glowing in the dark room. Talk later, she had said. Yes, I whispered to the empty room. We certainly will. I turned off the phone. I stood up and reached for the zipper on the back of my dress. It was time to take it off. It was time to stop being the bride and start being the person who had to clean up the mess. But for that one final moment, standing in the dark, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the heartbreak. It was heavy, and it was cold, and it felt exactly like the absence of love. We returned to Madison on a Tuesday evening. The honeymoon had been brief. A 4-day escape to a cabin in Door County that was supposed to be romantic, but ended up feeling like a period of convalescence. We spent most of the time staring at the lake, holding hands, and not talking about the gaping hole in our wedding photos. I told myself that once we got back to reality, back to our routine, the stinging humiliation of my mother's absence would fade. I told myself that the silence from Savannah was just them giving us space. I was wrong. The reality that awaited me was not a fresh start. It was an email inbox full of red flags. On Wednesday morning, I sat at my desk with a cup of black coffee, ready to log into my work server and lose myself in the comforting binary world of compliance auditing. But before I could start reviewing hospital supply chain contracts, a notification popped up on my personal email. Subject, urgent balance, outstanding Magnolia Cove estate. My stomach dropped. I clicked the email. It was formatted with a sterile, corporate aggression. The text informed me that the final payment for the venue, which had been due 48 hours prior to the event, was still unpaid. It listed a balance of $24,500, plus a late fee of 5% that had accrued over the last week. I stared at the number. $24,500. This had to be a mistake, a glitch, a crossed wire in the banking system. My mother had specifically told me, months ago, that she was handling the venue. It was not a casual offer. It was a formal discussion we had over dinner when we first booked the place. She had looked me in the eye and said that Dad had left a specific educational trust that she had converted into a general family fund, and this was my portion. She said she wanted to pay the venue directly to save me the hassle of transferring large sums. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. My hands were cold. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was bright, airy, and completely devoid of the guilt I expected. "Hey, sweetie, you are back." "How is the cabin, Mom?" I said, skipping the pleasantries. "I just got a terrifying email from Magnolia Cove. They are saying the final balance is overdue. They are charging me late fees." There was a pause on the line, a beat of silence that felt calculated. "Oh, that," she said, her tone dropping into a soothing, dismissive register. "Don't you worry about that. Harper, I saw that notification too. I already called them. It is just a processing delay with the bank wire. You know how slow these southern banks can be." They sent me a final notice. "Mom," I pressed, looking at the bold red text on my screen. "They are threatening to send it to collections. A wire transfer takes 24 hours. Max, the wedding was 10 days ago. I told you. I handled it," she said, a slight edge of irritation creeping into her voice. "Why are you so high-strung? You just got back from your honeymoon. You should be basking in the glow. Not obsessing over administrative errors. I spoke to a manager there, a nice lady named Jessica, and she said she would flag the account to ignore the automated emails." "Jessica?" I asked. I spoke to Jessica on the wedding day. She asked me for a credit card because the wire hadn't cleared then. "Either." "Exactly," Denise said smoothly. "It is all part of the same mix-up. I am telling you. The money is in transit. Just delete the email. Harper, do not create stress where there is none." She sounded so convincing. If I were anyone else, if I were just a daughter who wanted to believe her mother, I might have let it go. But I am not just a daughter. I am an auditor. And in my line of work, when someone tells you to ignore a red flag, you start digging. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I will wait a few days. Thanks, Mom. That is my girl." She said, "Love you." I hung up, and then I immediately opened a new browser tab. I went to the Magnolia Cove client portal. I had not logged in since the week before the wedding, mostly because I thought everything was settled. I typed in my username and password. The dashboard loaded. The first thing I saw was the giant red banner across the top, "Payment Overdue." I clicked on the Account Settings tab. I wanted to see the communication log. I wanted to see the record of the call my mother claimed to have made. What I found made my blood run cold. Under the Primary Contact Information section, my email address, Harper, Watsong Mail. Com had been removed. In its place was Denise, Watson, Savannah Yahoo. Com. I sat back in my chair, the air in my lungs turning into ice. She hadn't just handled the payment, she had hijacked the account. She had changed the contact email so that I wouldn't see the overdue notices. The only reason I received the email this morning was that the system automatically CC'd the original registrant when an account went into final notice status. If they hadn't been threatening legal action, I never would have known. I scrolled down to the activity log. September 15th. Contact email, updated. September 15th. Billing address, updated. September 20th. Payment method removed. September 15th. That was 2 weeks before the wedding. That was around the same time she stopped returning my calls about the seating chart. I felt a surge of nausea. This wasn't negligence. This was administration. This was a deliberate effort to hide the status of the account from me. I needed a break. I needed to step away from the numbers for a second before I screamed. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram, a reflex to numb the panic. The first story in my feed was from Nolan. I hadn't spoken to my brother since that 30-second video call from the parking lot. I had been too hurt to reach out, and he, predictably, had been too cowardly to check on me. His story had been posted 20 minutes ago. It was a repost of a memory from 10 days ago, my wedding day. The photo showed Nolan and my mother sitting at a table with white tablecloths. They were holding up glasses of dark red wine. They were smiling. Not the apologetic, stressed smiles of people dealing with a family emergency. They looked triumphant. They looked like they had just won the lottery. The caption was vague. Just 3 emojis, a pen, a handshake, and a house. Big moves. The text overlay read, "Securing the future." I zoomed in on the photo. I analyzed it the way I analyzed evidence photos for insurance claims. In the background, out of focus, was a waiter walking by with a tray. The logo on his apron was blurry, but I could make out the shape. It was a distinctive, stylized anchor. I recognized that anchor. It belonged to the Commodore, a high-end steakhouse in downtown Savannah. It was the kind of place where a ribeye cost $80 and you had to book a table weeks in advance. So, while I was walking down the aisle wondering why my family had abandoned me, they were eating steak and drinking expensive Cabernet 2 hours away. Securing the future. What future? Nolan didn't have a job. He had projects. He had ideas. He had a series of failed startups that my parents always seemed to bail out. My phone rang in my hand, startling me. It was a local number I didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Harper." "Hi, Ms. Watson?" a woman's voice said. She sounded brisk and professional. "This is Karen from Low Country Linens. We provided the chair covers and table runners for your event at Magnolia Cove." "Yes. Hi, Karen," I said, trying to switch gears. Was everything okay with the return? The return was fine. Karen said, "I am calling because we received an email request regarding your final invoice. The email came from your account, but the signature was from a Denise Watson. The request was to change the payment method from the credit card on file to a net 30 invoice to be paid by check." I closed my eyes. I did not authorize that. "I had a feeling," Karen said, her voice softening slightly. "The email address was different from the one we have on our contract. And honestly, we do not do net 30 for weddings. We require payment upon delivery. Since the card on file was declined this morning when we tried to run the balance, I had to call you directly." "Declined?" I asked. "Which card?" "It ends in 4022, she said. That was my mother's card. She had given it to them for the deposit. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I was struggling to contain. "Karen, please do not accept any requests from Denise Watson. I will pay the balance right now with my own card. Can you take the number over the phone?" "Absolutely," she said. I gave her my card details. I paid the $400 for the linens. It was a small amount compared to the venue, but the principle of it felt like a sledgehammer to the chest. My mother hadn't just failed to pay the venue. She was actively trying to float the debt on every single contract she could touch. She was trying to shift the payment terms to net 30, a business term meaning payment is due in 30 days, presumably to buy herself time. Time for what? I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the gray Wisconsin sky. The trees were bare, stripped of their leaves by the autumn wind. I felt stripped too. Stripped of the illusion that this was just a messy, disorganized family. This was not a mess. This was a strategy. My mother was gaslighting me. She was telling me the check was in the mail while simultaneously hacking into my vendor accounts to delay billing. She was lying to my face with a smile that I had trusted for 34 years. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away aggressively. "No," I said aloud to the empty room. "No more crying." I was done being the hurt daughter. The hurt daughter was powerless. The hurt daughter waited for apologies that would never come. The hurt daughter believed the lies because the truth was too painful to bear. I needed to stop thinking like a daughter and start thinking like an auditor. In my job, when I suspect fraud, I do not ask the suspect for a confession. I do not ask them why they did it. I build a file. I collect the data. I trace the IP addresses. I match the timestamps. I gather irrefutable proof until the weight of the evidence is so crushing that they have no room to maneuver. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Audit 2024. Then I drafted an email to the accounting department at Magnolia Cove. I didn't write it as a confused bride. I wrote it as a compliance officer, to accounts receivable. Magnolia Cove Estate, from Harper Watson, subject unauthorized account access. Request for audit trail. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally dispute the account activity regarding the contact information changes on my client portal. I did not authorize the removal of my email address, nor did I authorize any changes to the billing responsibility. Please provide a full log of all login activity for the account associated with my contract, specifically dates between September 1st and today. Furthermore, please provide copies of any and all documents, specifically ACH authorization forms or payment restructure requests that were submitted during this period. This is a matter of potential identity fraud. I hit send. I spent the rest of the afternoon working, or pretending to work. I audited 3 contracts for the hospital, finding a discrepancy in a laundry service agreement that saved the company $12,000. It felt good. It felt controllable. At 4 o'clock, a reply came from Magnolia Cove. Dear Ms. Watson, attached. Please find the requested documentation. Please note that on September 12th, we received a signed ACH payment authorization form allowing us to draft the final balance from a new bank account. However, that draft was returned for insufficient funds yesterday, which triggered the final notice. Attached ACH auth SEP 12. My heart hammered against my ribs. I downloaded the PDF. I opened it. It was a standard form. Authorization for direct payment. The bank account number listed was not mine. It was a savings account I recognized from when I was a teenager, a joint account my mother used for family savings, but that wasn't what made the room spin. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature field. In the box, scrawled in black digital ink, was a signature, Harper Watson. I stared at it. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the H, the same sharp slant on the W. It was a good forgery, a very good forgery, but I knew I hadn't signed it. On September 12th, I was in a quarterly review meeting with the hospital board from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. I hadn't signed anything personal that day. My mother hadn't just logged into my account. She hadn't just moved money. She had forged my signature on a legal financial document to authorize a payment from an account that didn't have the money, knowing full well it would bounce, just to buy 2 more weeks of silence before the wedding. She had committed a felony in my name. I sat there, staring at the screen. The sadness was gone completely now. It had evaporated, leaving behind something hard and crystalline. I printed the document. I picked up a red pen. I circled the signature. Then I circled the date. And then, calmly, methodically, I began to print everything else: the email logs, the vendor notes, the screenshot of Nolan's Instagram story. I was going to audit my own family, and I was going to make sure that when I presented my findings, there would be nowhere left for them to hide. I did not sleep that night. Sleep is a luxury for people who have peace of mind, and I had replaced my peace of mind with a singular burning purpose. I had entered what I call the tunnel. It is a state of being I usually reserve for the final week of a fiscal year audit, when the numbers refuse to balance and the clock is ticking. The world outside the tunnel ceases to exist. There is no hunger, no fatigue, no husband sleeping in the next room. There is only the data. I sat at my kitchen island, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating the granite countertop. I had the forged ACH authorization form open in one window, in another. I had drafted a new email to the legal department of the venue. I knew that speaking to a front desk coordinator or even a sales manager was no longer sufficient. I needed the back-end data. I needed the digital footprints that people always forget they are leaving behind. My request was specific. I did not ask for explanations. I asked for raw logs. I cited the Data Privacy Act and the fraud clauses within their own terms of service. I demanded a complete history of access for my account, specifically requesting IP addresses, session durations, and a record of every modification made to the file since its inception, to their credit, or perhaps out of fear of the liability I had subtly threatened. The venue responded just as the sun was beginning to bleach the sky gray. The email came from a generic address belonging to Tidemark Hospitality Group. I paused when I saw the name, Tidemark Hospitality Group. I had seen that name before. but I had never paid it much attention. It was the parent company that owned Magnolia Cove. I did a quick search on a separate tab. Tidemark was a massive conglomerate. They owned wedding venues, boutique hotels, and golf courses across the South, including several high-end properties in Savannah. This detail seemed irrelevant at first, a piece of corporate trivia, but my auditor's brain filed it away. In large systems, money is fluid. It moves through internal channels that are often invisible to the customer. I opened the attachment they had sent. It was a CSV file, a dense spreadsheet of dates, times, and alphanumeric strings. To the untrained eye, it was gibberish. To me, it was a map. I poured my third cup of coffee and began to filter the columns. First, I isolated the IP addresses. An IP address is like a digital fingerprint. It tells you exactly where a device is located in the physical world. I saw my own IP address from Madison, appearing consistently throughout the first 6 months of the planning process. Then, starting in late August, a new IP address appeared. I copied the string of numbers and pasted it into a geolocation tool. The pin dropped on a map of Savannah, Georgia. I zoomed in. The location was not a public Wi-Fi spot. It was not a coffee shop. It was a residential provider in the Ardsley Park neighborhood. It was my mother's house. I looked at the timestamps associated with this IP address. One entry stood out immediately. It was dated September 28th, 2 days before the wedding. The timestamp was 2 in the afternoon. I froze. I remembered that day clearly. I had called my mother in a panic because one of the bridesmaids had a dress crisis. I remembered exactly what Denise had said to me on the phone. She had whispered, claiming she was in the waiting room of an urgent care clinic because Nolan had suffered a severe migraine. She said she couldn't talk because it was a quiet zone, but the log told a different story. At exactly that moment, someone at her house was logged into my venue portal for 45 minutes. You do not log into a wedding venue portal from a hospital waiting room to check a balance. You do it from a desktop computer when you are comfortable and have work to do. She had lied about where she was. That was expected. But what she was doing during that login session was what mattered. I filtered the activity column. User action profile update. User action notification preferences. Changed. User action document upload. I traced the timeline back further. I was looking for the moment the control shifted. I found an email in my personal archive from 8 months ago. It was a thread where Denise and I were discussing the deposit. Let me handle the vendor portal. Harper, she had written. Since Tidemark owns the Commodore Club where your father and I were members, I get priority status if the account is linked to my profile. We can get upgrades on the bar package. Just give me the login, and I will link it to my rewards account. I read the email 3 times. A trap. It had been a trap laid months in advance, baited with the promise of an upgraded bar package. She hadn't wanted access to help me. She wanted access to control the asset. She needed the account to be permeable. She needed to be able to move things around without me seeing the friction. I went back to the spreadsheet. I was looking for the money. According to the invoice I had received, the balance was unpaid. But according to my mother's frantic defense at the Christmas dinner, she had moved it. I found the transaction line item on the date of the wedding, October 1st, Internal Ledger Transfer Credit Reallocation. The amount was $12,000. This was the deposit money. The cash I had sent her months ago, which she had supposedly paid to the venue. The log showed that the money had been sitting in my account as a credit, and then, on the morning of my wedding, it was moved. It wasn't refunded to a credit card. It wasn't wired back to a bank. It was reallocated to where the spreadsheet just listed a destination code, EVTSAV 2400614NW. I stared at the code. EVT likely stood for event. SAV was Savannah, and NW, Nolan Watson. The code was an event ID. The money hadn't left the Tidemark system. It had simply been slid from one column to another, from one property to another. I went back to the venue portal. I was technically still logged in as the primary account holder. Even though she had changed the email, I navigated to the Documents tab. a section I rarely checked because it usually just contained the initial contract and liability waivers. There was a new file there, uploaded on October 1st. It was labeled Transfer Recs Signed, PDF. My hand hovered over the mouse. I felt a physical sickness in my gut, the kind of nausea that comes when you are about to look at a wound to see how deep it goes. I clicked open. It was a form titled Sidemark Hospitality Group Event Deposit Transfer Request. The form was simple. It allowed a client to move a deposit from one Tidemark property to another, provided the account holder authorized it. The From section listed my wedding Harper Watson, Ethan Pierce, Magnolia Cove. The To section listed a different venue, the Azalea Room, Savannah. The event date listed for the new venue was June 14th of the following year, and there, in the field, for event name, typed in clear, undeniable block letters, Nolan Watson, Kara Miller, wedding. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. It wasn't just theft, it was cannibalism. My mother had taken the money I had saved. The money she claimed was a gift from my father's legacy, and she had used it to book a wedding venue for my brother. She had done this on the very morning she was supposed to be driving to my wedding. While I was putting on my veil, she was filling out this form. While I was waiting for her text, she was likely on the phone with a sales representative, ensuring that the $12,000 was safely credited to Nolan's account so he wouldn't lose his reservation. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the transfer request. This time, it wasn't my name. It was signed, Denise Watson, authorized proxy. She had used the linked account status she had bragged about the VIP status from my father's old club membership to grant herself proxy power over my contract. She had tricked me into giving her access so she could legally loot my wedding to fund his. I looked at the date again, June 14th. Nolan wasn't even engaged in October, or at least, he hadn't announced it. He had posted that photo of the steak dinner with the caption, Securing the Future. They had celebrated booking his venue with the money they stole from mine. On the night of my wedding, the cruelty was so precise it felt almost architectural. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. I printed the document. The printer hummed in the quiet house, a rhythmic mechanical sound that grounded me. I printed the transfer request. I printed the audit logs. I printed the email where she asked for access. I printed the geolocation map showing her at home. I fetched a fresh binder from my home office supply shelf. It was a stark black binder, 3 inches thick. I punched holes in the documents. I organized them chronologically. I used tab dividers to separate the sections: unauthorized access, forgery, funds reallocation, communication lies. I was building a case file. I realized then that I could not ask them about this. If I called Denise now and screamed that I knew she had transferred the money to Nolan's account, she would spin it. She would say it was a loan. She would say she intended to pay it back before I noticed. She would use tears and guilt and talk about how Nolan was in a bind and family helps family. She would gaslight me until I doubted my own eyes. No, I could not give her the chance to speak. I had to treat this like a hostile audit. In a hostile audit, you do not interview the subject until you have enough evidence to bury them. You do not ask questions that you do not already know the answer to. And you certainly do not let them know you are looking. I made a decision right then. Sitting in the cold morning light of my kitchen, I would go silent. I would not text her. I would not call Nolan. When they reached out, I would be brief, polite, and vague. I would let them think they had gotten away with it. I would let them believe that I was just a confused, overwhelmed bride who was handling the clerical error with the venue. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them to feel safe, because when people feel safe, they get sloppy. They stop covering their tracks. I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a gunshot in the empty room. I picked up my phone and saw a text from my mother, sent late last night while I was deep in the data. Hope you are sleeping better. Sweetie, don't worry about the venue. I am sure it is all sorted. I stared at the message. I didn't feel the urge to throw the phone anymore. I felt cold. I felt powerful. I typed a reply, keeping it perfectly bland. Thanks. Mom, I am working on it. Talk soon. I put the phone down. I looked at the black binder on the counter. It was heavy with the truth. I had the who. I had the how. I had the where. Now, all I had to do was wait for the when. And I knew exactly when to drop this binder on the table. I would wait for the one time of year when the pressure to be a perfect, happy family was so high that they wouldn't dare cause a scene. I would wait for Christmas. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the snow-covered lawn. I felt like a different person than the one who had sat down at the computer the night before. That person had been a victim. This person was a prosecutor. I turned back to the invoice on the screen, the one threatening legal action. I would have to pay it. I would have to drain my own savings. The money Ethan and I were putting aside for a down payment on a house, to cover the debt my mother had created. It would hurt. It would set us back 2 years, but I would pay it, because paying it made me the creditor. And once I paid that bill, the debt was no longer owed to the venue. It was owed to me. And I always collect what is mine. The weeks leading up to Christmas became a study in psychological warfare. I had the documents in my black binder, the IP logs, the forged signature, the transfer request, but documents are cold, hard things. People, specifically my family, are soft, slippery, and incredibly adept at changing the shape of reality to suit their needs. I needed to test the waters. I needed to see how they would react when pressed, not with accusation, but with simple, undeniable logic. I wanted to see the mechanism of the lie in action. I waited until a Thursday evening to make the call. It was late enough that I knew my mother would be 2 glasses of Chardonnay deep into her nightly routine, relaxed and likely scrolling through Facebook on her iPad. When she answered, her voice was warm, wrapped in that performative maternal affection she wore like a scarf. "Harper, I was just looking at ornaments online. I found these beautiful hand-blown glass angels. I was thinking of getting one for you and Ethan for the tree this year." "That sounds nice, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. I was sitting at my dining table. The binder closed in front of me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. "Listen, I was on the phone with the venue again today, just trying to clear up this billing confusion." "Oh, for heaven's sake," she sighed, the warmth instantly evaporating. "Are you still harping on that I told you?" "Harper, it is handled. You are going to give yourself an ulcer." "I know you said it is handled," I said, but the venue manager mentioned something odd. She said the contact email on the portal was changed back in September. It was switched to your Yahoo address. Do you know anything about that? There was a pause. It wasn't the pause of someone searching their memory. It was the pause of someone calibrating their defense. "Changed," she said, her tone pitching up in mock surprise. "Why would I change your email? I barely know how to log into that website. Half the time I can't even remember my own Netflix password." "The log shows it was done from a computer in Savannah," I said, pressing gently. "It happened right around the time you stopped returning my calls about the seating chart." "Well, you are imagining things," she snapped. "Or maybe their system is broken. You know how technology is. Harper, it glitches. Probably some automatic update. I certainly didn't do it. Why would I want to receive all those spam emails about appetizers and napkins?" "To hide the overdue notices," I said. It wasn't a question. "I am not going to listen to this," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "I have broken my back trying to help you with this wedding. I offered to pay for the venue a huge sum of money, by the way, and instead of a thank you, I get an interrogation. You are being paranoid. It is ugly. Harper, it really is. I am just asking about the email, Mom." "You are accusing me of sabotage," she cried. "I am your mother. I missed the wedding because of a medical emergency with your brother, and you still haven't forgiven me. That is what this is about, isn't it? You are punishing me." "It is not about punishment," I said. "It is about the $25,000 that is missing." "It is not missing," she shouted. "It is in transit. I am hanging up now. I am not going to let you ruin my evening with your neurotic obsession." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a strange sense of validation. You are imagining things. Technology glitches. You are paranoid. It was the classic gaslighting script. Read word for word. She didn't offer to check. She didn't ask for details. She simply denied reality and attacked my character. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a text message. It wasn't from Mom. It was from Nolan. I stared at the screen. The message was a wall of text, a solid block of gray bubbles that took up the entire display. Mom just called me crying. Are you serious right now? She is stressed out of her mind trying to get everything ready for Christmas, and you are harassing her about some clerical error. You are so selfish. Harper, you always have been. You think the world revolves around your spreadsheets. Mom has done everything for us. She handles all the finances for the family. And yeah, sometimes things get complicated, but she always makes it work. You need to back off. She is only trying to protect the family assets. You are acting like a stranger. Fix it. I read it twice. Protect the family assets. That was the phrase that stuck. In Nolan's warped worldview, family assets meant Nolan's lifestyle. My wedding venue deposit had become a family asset the moment he needed it, and by protecting it, he meant stealing it from me to secure his own venue. He was flipping the script. In his narrative, I was the aggressor. I was the one causing pain by asking where my money went. He was the noble defender of our fragile mother. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the text. I printed it. I added it to the binder under the tab labeled coercion. The pressure didn't stop there. The next day, I received a call from my Aunt Linda. Linda was my mother's older sister, a woman who viewed conflict avoidance as a religious sacrament. She didn't know the truth. Denise would never tell her the truth, but she knew there was tension. Harper, honey, Linda said, her voice dripping with syrup. I was talking to your mom today. She sounds so down. She says you guys are fighting. We are not fighting, Aunt Linda, I said, cradling the phone against my shoulder as I sorted through my mail. I am just trying to get a receipt for the wedding venue. Oh, money, Linda sighed, as if I had mentioned something vulgar like sewage. Money destroys families. Harper, you know that. Is it really worth upsetting your mother over a bill? It is Christmas, the season of forgiveness. It is $25,000, Linda, I said, and I am the one being sued for it. Sued? She let out a nervous laugh. Oh, surely not. Denise said it was just a mix-up. Look, honey, just let it go for now. For the holiday, your mom has sacrificed her whole life for you kids. She is getting older. You do not want to look back and regret fighting over cash when she is gone. Just make peace. Coming home for Christmas will fix everything. Being together is what matters. Being together implies trust, I said. Family is family, Linda recited, the ultimate shutdown phrase. You forgive them because they are your blood. Promise me you will be nice to her. She is really fragile right now. I promised I would be civil. I didn't promise I would be nice. There is a difference. I hung up, feeling the weight of the social web tightening around me. They were all in on it, even the ones who didn't know the crime. They were the enablers, the peacekeepers who smoothed over the cracks so the house wouldn't fall down, never realizing that the foundation was rotten. They wanted me to swallow the loss. They wanted me to pay the bill, smile for the photos, and pretend that my mother hadn't committed a felony against me. But I had one more test to run. I waited 2 days. I let the silence stretch. Then, on a Monday morning, I sent a group text to both Denise and Nolan. I kept it cheerful. I kept it light. Hey guys, getting excited for the trip. Listen, before I head down, I really need to close the file on the wedding budget for my own taxes. Mom, can you just snap a photo of the wire transfer receipt or the bank confirmation for the venue payment? Just so I can show the venue and get them off my back. Thanks. I sat and watched the 3 dots dance on the screen. Denise was typing. Then she stopped. Nolan was typing. Then he stopped. 5 minutes passed. The silence was loud. If she had paid it, as she claimed, sending a receipt would take 30 seconds. She could log into her bank app, take a screenshot, and hit send. It was the easiest request in the world. Finally, a message from Denise popped up. I have looked everywhere. Honey, I think I might have misplaced the physical receipt, and I can't get into the online banking right now because the security token is acting up. I will go to the branch after Christmas and get a printout. Let's just deal with it then. I misplaced the receipt. For a $25,000 transaction, I almost laughed. It was such a lazy lie. It was an insult to my intelligence. Then, immediately after, a message from Nolan. Honestly, Harper, that venue is a mess. I have heard they double book people all the time. Their admin office is a disaster. They probably lost the check. You shouldn't trust their records over Mom's. I froze. I have heard they double book people all the time. How would Nolan know that he lived his life in sports bars and on golf courses? He didn't know anything about the wedding industry, unless he had been dealing with them personally, unless he had been in their office or on the phone with them, negotiating his own contract. He was projecting. He was taking the inside knowledge he had gained from booking his own stolen wedding date and using it to discredit the venue in my eyes. He knew their system was chaotic because he was currently exploiting it. Gotcha, I whispered. I typed back a simple thumbs-up emoji to both of them. Okay, we can sort it out at Christmas. I had confirmed what I needed to know. They weren't just scrambling. They were coordinating. They were covering a specific act. Denise was the shield, and Nolan was the sword. They were a team, and I was the opponent. That afternoon, I heard the mail carrier drop the post through the slot in my front door. I walked to the hallway and picked up the pile. There was a holiday card from a college friend, a coupon booklet for a pizza place, and at the bottom, a heavy, legal-sized envelope. The return address was not Magnolia Cove. It was Harrison, Ford Gables, attorneys at law. My stomach dropped. I tore it open right there in the hallway, my coat still on. Refinal demand for payment debt owed to Magnolia Cove Estate. Dear Ms. Watson, we represent Tidemark Hospitality Group in the matter of the outstanding balance for the event held on September 30th. Despite repeated attempts by our client to resolve this matter amicably, the balance of $25,750, including accrued interest and penalties, remains unpaid. This letter serves as a formal notice. If payment is not received in full by December 26th, we have been instructed to file a civil suit against you in the Circuit Court of Charleston County. Furthermore, we will report this delinquency to all major credit bureaus. Please govern yourself accordingly. I stared at the paper. The words December 26th seemed to pulse on the page. The day after Christmas. They had given me until the day after Christmas. The timing was almost poetic. My family wanted a peaceful, silent Christmas. The lawyers wanted their money the moment the holiday ended. I walked into the kitchen and placed the legal thread on top of my binder. The reality of the situation had shifted from digital to physical. This wasn't just data anymore. This was a lawsuit. This was my credit score, my reputation, my financial future, all on the line. If I didn't pay this, I would be sued. If I did pay it, I would be admitting that the debt was mine. But I had a third option. I looked at the date on the letter again. December 26th. I had exactly 1 week. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the law firm. I didn't want to fight them. I wanted to use them. Harrison, Ford Gables, a receptionist answered. Hi, I said, my voice sharp and professional, the voice of the auditor. My name is Harper Watson. I am calling regarding a demand letter I just received. Reference number 4492. One moment, please. I waited. The hold music was a bland, orchestral version of Jingle Bells. It was grotesquely cheerful. This is Mr. Harrison, a deep voice said. I am the handling attorney. How do you intend to proceed? Ms. Watson. I intend to pay, I said. But not today. I need you to hold off on filing until the 27th. The deadline is the 26th, he said firmly. I know, I said. But I am traveling to Savannah to meet with the parties who actually authorized the diversion of these funds. I'm going to get you your money. Mr. Harrison, but I need you to do something for me first. We are not in the business of doing favors for debtors, he said. It is not a favor. I said, It is evidence. I need you to send me a notarized affidavit from the venue confirming that the portal was accessed by an IP address not associated with me, and I need a formal statement that the receipt number my mother is about to give me, which I will forward to you, does not exist in your system." There was a silence on the line. Lawyers are like sharks. They can smell blood, but they can also smell a solid case. "If you are alleging fraud," he said, his tone shifting from aggressive to intrigued, "that changes the liability structure." "I am not alleging it yet," I said. "I am going to prove it. Over Christmas dinner, I just need you to be ready to receive the check when the dust settles." "I can give you until noon on the 27th, he said. "And Ms. Watson, if you do not pay, we will come for everything." "I understand," I said. "But you won't have to come for me. I am going to hand you the real debtor on a silver platter." I hung up. I looked at the final notice letter. I folded it neatly and placed it in my purse. I wasn't just bringing gifts to Savannah this year. I was bringing a subpoena. The gaslighting, the guilt trips, the lies about lost receipts. It all ended now. They wanted a family reunion, fine. I would give them one they would never forget. The week before Christmas is usually reserved for last-minute shopping and wrapping presents. For me, it was reserved for building a trap. I sat in my home office, the door closed, with 3 monitors glowing in front of me. I had arranged a video conference with the director of operations at Tidemark Hospitality. It took 2 days of aggressive emailing and escalating my ticket through 4 levels of customer service to get him on the screen. His name was Mr. Sterling, a man with a polished, corporate demeanor that suggested he was used to dealing with angry brides, but perhaps not angry auditors. "Ms. Watson," he said, adjusting his tie, "I understand you have some concerns regarding the unauthorized access to your portal. Our IT team has looked into it, and while we see the changes you mentioned, we cannot disclose specific user identity details without a subpoena due to our privacy policy." "Mr. Sterling?" I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "With all due respect, I am the contract holder. The privacy policy protects me. It does not protect a third party who accessed my account using a stolen password to divert funds. I am looking at Clause 14, Section B of your own terms of service. The client is responsible for maintaining account security, but the venue assumes liability for any internal transfers executed without direct written consent from the primary signatory." I paused to let that sink in. "I did not give written consent," I continued. "The signature on the transfer request is forged. If you cannot confirm who requested that transfer, then Tidemark Hospitality is liable for facilitating fraud. I am happy to let my lawyer explain this to your legal team, or you can help me clarify the record right now." "Mr. Sterling blinked. He looked down at his notes. The mention of liability always shifts the conversation. "We certainly do not want any misunderstandings," he said, his tone noticeably less dismissive. "If the signature is indeed contested, we can provide a statement of fact regarding the account activity. We can confirm that the transfer request originated from a device not previously associated with your account history." "I need more than that," I said. "I need an affidavit stating that the funds deposited for my event were reallocated to event ID EVT-SAV 240614 NW on October 1st, and I need it to confirm that the request came from the user profile associated with Denise Watson." He hesitated. "I can confirm the reallocation and the timestamp. I can confirm the user profile that executed the action. If I send this to you, is it your intention to pursue legal action against the venue?" "Not if you help me fix it," I said. "I intend to pursue the person who committed the fraud. I just need you to provide the map." "Very well," he said. "I will have our compliance officer draft a statement of account history. You will have it by end of business today." "Thank you. Mr. Sterling." I ended the call. Step 1 was complete. I had the venue on record. Step 2 was the bait. I needed Denise to commit to her lie in writing one last time. I needed a document from her that I could prove was false. A verbal lie is easy to deny later. She could claim I misheard her, or that she was confused. A written lie is a nail in the coffin. I opened my email client. I composed a message to my mother. I kept the tone light, almost apologetic. The dutiful daughter trying to solve a boring administrative problem. Subject, quick favor for the venue. Hi, Mom. I know you are busy with Christmas prep, and I'm so excited to see you. I'm just trying to get this annoying venue billing issue off my plate before we fly down. The manager said if I can just show them a proof of payment, they will clear the balance immediately. Could you please forward me the receipt or the bank confirmation for the transfer you made? I need it by 5 p.m. this Friday, so I can email it to them before they close for the holiday. Just a screenshot is fine. Love you. Harper. I hit send. Then I waited. Friday morning came and went. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Denise, working on it. The bank website is so slow today. Ugh, technology. I didn't reply. I knew she was scrambling. She was probably trying to figure out how to manufacture a receipt for a transaction that never happened. Or maybe she was looking for an old receipt she could alter. At 4:30 in the afternoon, 30 minutes before my deadline, an email arrived. Subject, FWD, payment confirmation. Here you go. Honey, found it in my spam folder. So weird. Hope this fixes it. See you soon. Attached receipt. Confirmation, JPG. I downloaded the image. I opened it in Photoshop so I could zoom in without losing resolution. It was a photo of a computer screen, a classic tactic to hide digital editing marks. It showed a bank transaction summary. The date was September 15th. The amount was $25,000. The payee was listed as Magnolia Cove Estate. It looked convincing at first glance. But I am an auditor. I look for the seams. I zoomed in on the font. The numbers 25,000 were in Arial. The rest of the bank text was in Verdana. It was a subtle difference, but to me, it was screaming. I looked at the alignment. The dollar sign was slightly higher than the numbers, just a fraction of a millimeter off. And then, the clincher. The transaction reference number at the bottom, REF 9982XJ7. I cross-referenced it with the standard transaction code format for her bank, which I knew because I used to bank there too. Their codes always started with TRX, not REF. She had doctored this. She had taken a screenshot of a different transaction, probably a payment for her car or her mortgage, and used a basic photo editor to paste new text over it. It was clumsy, it was desperate, and it was illegal. I forwarded the image immediately to Mr. Sterling at the venue. Mr. Sterling, please verify if the attached transaction reference number corresponds to any payment received by your accounts receivable department. 10 minutes later, his reply pinged. Ms. Watson, we have searched our entire database. Reference number REF 9982 does not exist. No payment of that amount was received on September 15th. Furthermore, the format of this receipt does not match the electronic remittance advice we received from that bank. Got you, I whispered. I printed the email from Denise. I printed the fake receipt. I printed Mr. Sterling's confirmation that it was fake. I punched holes in the papers and added them to the binder. The section labeled fraud was getting thick. I was ready. I closed the laptop. I looked around my living room. Ethan was packing our suitcases by the door. He looked up at me, his expression worried. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. We can just stay home. We can pay the bill, take the loss, and never talk to them again. No, I said. If we do that, they win. They steal my money. They ruin my wedding. And they get to play happy family while we foot the bill. I am not doing that. Ethan, not this time. It is going to be a bloodbath, he said softly. It is going to be an audit. I corrected him. And audits are only messy if you have something to hide. I walked over to the TV in the living room. I pulled out my iPad. I wanted to test the technology one last time. The plan relied on a single, crucial moment of technical integration. At my mother's house, she had a large smart TV in the dining room that she liked to use to play a fireplace loop or a slideshow of family photos during dinner. It was always connected to the Wi-Fi. I connected my iPad to our TV via AirPlay to practice. I opened the file, The Truth, PDF. It appeared instantly on the big screen, the invoice, the logs, the fake receipt, side by side in high definition. It was perfect. I disconnected. I packed the iPad in my carry-on bag, cushioned between two sweaters. I packed the binder in my checked luggage, buried deep under my shoes so no one would see it if they snooped. But I needed backup. Technology can fail. Wi-Fi can go down. Batteries can die. So I went to the printer one last time. I printed 3 full copies of the entire dossier. I stapled them neatly. I put each one in a plain manila envelope. One for me, one for Denise, one for Nolan. I felt a strange sense of calm as we drove to the airport the next morning. It was the calm of the executioner. I wasn't going to Savannah to argue. I wasn't going to yell or cry or ask why. I was going to present facts. When we landed in Savannah, the air was mild and humid. We took an Uber to my mother's house in Ardsley Park. As the car pulled up to the curb, I saw the house glowing with lights. There was a wreath on every window. A giant inflatable Santa stood on the lawn. It looked like the perfect American Christmas. Denise opened the door before we could even knock. She was wearing a red velvet dress and an apron that said, "Queen of the Kitchen." "Merry Christmas," she shrieked, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and wine. "Oh, I missed you so much. Look at you. You look tired. Come in. Come in. I have eggnog ready." I hugged her back. My arms felt stiff. "Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas." Nolan was in the living room, watching football. He stood up, a beer in his hand. "Hey, sis. Long time." He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had gotten away with it. He didn't look like someone who had stolen $25,000 from his sister. "Hey, Nolan," I said. I scanned the room. The dining table was already set. The smart TV was on the wall, displaying a looped video of a crackling log fire. Perfect, I thought. "So," Denise said, clapping her hands, "dinner will be ready in an hour. Why don't you guys settle in? Put your bags in the guest room. Relax. No shop talk tonight. Okay, just family." "Sounds great," I said. I carried my bag to the guest room. I unpacked the iPad. I checked the Wi-Fi signal. It was strong. I connected to the network. My phone remembered the password automatically. I tested the connection to the TV from the bedroom. A small code appeared on the screen in the living room for a split second before I canceled it. It worked. I took the 3 manila envelopes out of my suitcase. I sat on the edge of the bed and held them for a moment. This was it. In a few hours, the facade would crack. I walked back out to the kitchen. Denise was stirring gravy. Nolan was laughing at something on the TV. "Can I help with anything?" I asked. No, Denise said. "You are a guest. Just sit. Enjoy." I sat at the island. I watched her. I watched the woman who had raised me. The woman who had taught me to tie my shoes and balance a checkbook. I looked for a sign of guilt, a twitch in her eye, a tremble in her hand. There was nothing. She was humming Silent Night. She truly believed she had fixed it. She believed the fake receipt had satisfied me. She believed that because I hadn't screamed, I had accepted her reality. She had no idea that the receipt she sent me was currently printed on page 12 of the indictment sitting in the other room. "You know," I said casually, picking up a cracker, "I am really glad we are all here. It feels important." "It is," she said, beaming at me. "It is the most important thing in the world." "Yeah," Nolan chimed in from the couch. "It is good to have everyone back. No drama." "No drama," I repeated. I took a bite of the cracker. It was dry and tasteless in my mouth. Enjoy it while it lasts. I thought, because in about 3 hours, the only thing on that TV screen is going to be your own handwriting. The house in Ardsley Park was vibrating with a frequency that only I seemed to hear. To an outsider, it was the epitome of a Southern Christmas card come to life. The front porch was wrapped in fresh garland that smelled of sharp pine and cold air. Inside, the fireplace was roaring, though the thermostat was set high enough that the heat felt suffocating rather than cozy. My mother had gone overboard this year. There were more lights, more candles, and more gold ribbon than I had ever seen. as if she were trying to smother the reality of our family under layers of festive debris. I sat on the beige linen sofa, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, observing the ecosystem of the room. I had been in the house for less than 2 hours, but the dynamic was already crystal clear. Denise and Nolan were a unit. They moved with a synchronized energy that I had never seen before. Usually, Nolan was dismissive of her, treating her like a bank teller he could visit whenever he was overdrawn, and usually, Denise was frantic, chasing after him for scraps of affection. But tonight, they were allies. They stood close together by the bar cart. When Denise laughed, she glanced at Nolan to make sure he was laughing too. When Nolan poured a drink, he poured one for her without asking. It was the bond of accomplices. They were two people who shared a secret, a heavy, $25,000 secret, and the weight of it had compressed them into a diamond-hard front. "Harper, honey," Denise called out, breaking away from Nolan to flutter over to me. She was holding a small, silver-wrapped box. "I know we are doing gifts later with everyone, but I just wanted to give you this little thing now, a stocking stuffer." She sat next to me, invading my personal space with a cloud of Chanel No. 5. She pressed the box into my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Open it," she whispered, her eyes wide and pleading. "I saw it and thought of you." I peeled back the silver paper. Inside was a small crystal ornament in the shape of a snowflake. It was tasteful. It was also generic, the kind of thing you buy at a high-end department store when you have forgotten someone's actual interests but want to spend enough money to look like you care. "It is beautiful, Mom," I said. My voice was calm. I didn't fake a gasp of delight. I simply held it up to the light. "I just missed you so much," she said, her voice catching in her throat. She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It was a gesture she used to do when I was a child, usually right after she had done something to hurt my feelings. "I hate that we have been distant. I know the wedding mess was stressful, but I'm so glad we put it behind us. I am so glad you understood about the receipt." She was testing the ice. She wanted to see if it would hold. I looked at her. I looked at the lines of tension around her mouth, the way her eyes darted away from mine. She was terrified. "I am glad to be here too," I said. I didn't say I understood. I didn't say it is behind us. I just said I was glad to be here. She took it as a victory. She squeezed my knee and stood up, looking relieved. "Good. That is good. Now, let me go check on the ham." As she walked away, Nolan drifted over. He was wearing a velvet blazer that I knew he couldn't afford. He swirled his bourbon, looking down at me with a smirk that sat somewhere between arrogance and pity. "Nice ornament," he said. "It is," I replied. "Mom went all out this year," he said, gesturing with his glass. "She really wanted everything perfect, you know, for the guests." "The guests?" I asked, though I knew exactly who was coming. "Kara and her parents," Nolan said. He puffed out his chest slightly. "The Millers. You remember them? Mr. Miller is on the board at the bank. They are big-deal people. Harper, we need tonight to go smooth." "I am sure it will be lovely," I said. "Yeah, well," he leaned in closer, dropping his voice. "I have got some big news dropping tonight, big plans. Kara and I are finally locking things down." "Is that so?" I asked. I watched him closely. I looked for the shame. I looked for any sign that he knew his big plans were being funded by the sister sitting in front of him. There was none. There was only the entitlement of a golden child who had never been told no. "We found a venue," he said, watching my face for a reaction. "Top tier, high end, none of that barn wedding stuff." He was trying to bait me. He wanted me to snap. He wanted me to say, my wedding wasn't a barn wedding. It was a coastal estate. He wanted to drag me into a petty argument about taste so he could call me jealous. I didn't bite. I took a sip of my water. "Congratulations," I said. "Planning a wedding is expensive. I hope you have your budget sorted." He blinked. He hadn't expected that. "Oh, the budget is fine," he said quickly. glancing toward the kitchen where Mom was. "We have investors, family support, you know how it is." "I do know," I said. "Family support is very important." The doorbell rang before he could decipher the tone of my voice. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Denise rushed out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her face transforming into a mask of aggressive hospitality. Nolan straightened his jacket. Even Ethan, who had been reading a book in the corner, stood up. Sensing the arrival of the audience, Kara Miller walked in first, followed by her parents. Kara was a nice enough girl, pretty in a vacuous, eager way. She was 24, 10 years younger than me, and she looked at Nolan with an adoration that made my stomach turn. Her parents, Bob and Susan Miller, were Savannah royalty old money, stiff posture, and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Merry Christmas." The greetings erupted, coats were taken, drinks were offered, the room filled with the meaningless chatter of socialites pretending to like each other. I stood by the fireplace, watching. Denise was in her element. She was charming Mr. Miller, laughing at his jokes, while simultaneously guiding Mrs. Miller to the best armchair. She was playing the role of the wealthy, benevolent matriarch perfectly. You would never guess that 3 days ago she was editing a bank screenshot in Microsoft Paint to hide a felony. Kara floated over to me, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Harper," she squealed. "Oh my God. It is so good to finally meet you properly. Nolan talks about you all the time." "Does he?" I asked, smiling. "I bet he has some interesting stories." "He says you are super smart," Kara said. "Like a business genius. That is so cool. I am terrible with numbers. Daddy says I should just marry rich so I do not have to worry about math." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Math is useful," I said, "especially when you are planning a wedding." Kara's eyes lit up. "Oh, I know, it is so stressful, right? I mean, I know you guys just got married in September." "Congratulations. By the way, I was so bummed we couldn't come. Nolan said it was a small, private thing." I felt a sharp ping in my chest. A small, private thing. That was the narrative they had sold. They hadn't told people they skipped it. They had told people they weren't invited, or that it was an elopement. "It was intimate," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But we missed having family there." "Well, ours is going to be huge," Kara said, leaning in conspiratorially. "Daddy is inviting like 300 people. It is insane. But the venue we got is perfect. We were so lucky to get the date." Across the room, I saw Denise stiffen. She was pouring wine for Mrs. Miller, but her head snapped toward us. She had heard the word venue. "Oh," I said, keeping my eyes on Kara but my attention on my mother. "Where is it?" "It is this gorgeous place downtown," Kara said. "The Azalea Room. It is part of that big group, Tidemark Hospitality. You know them. Right, Nolan said you used one of their properties too." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Denise abandoned the wine bottle. She practically lunged across the rug. "Kara, honey," Denise interrupted, her voice shrill. "Come try these crab cakes before they get cold. You know how Nolan loves crab cakes?" Kara looked confused by the sudden interruption. "Oh, sure, Mrs. Watson, but I was just telling Harper about the loyalty perk." She turned back to me, ignoring Denise's desperate hand waving. "It is so cool," Kara continued. "Since you guys had your wedding with Tidemark, Nolan was able to transfer the loyalty status to our contract. They even waived the deposit fee because they said the funds were already in the system from the family account. Isn't that amazing?" I stopped breathing for a second. It wasn't just a transfer. They had spun it to Kara as a perk. They had told her that my wedding money was a family account credit that I had graciously allowed them to use. They hadn't just stolen the money. They had stolen the credit for the generosity. I looked at Denise. She was pale. She was staring at me with eyes that were screaming, "Stop! Please stop!" I looked at Nolan. He was suddenly very interested in his shoes. "That is amazing," I said slowly. "I didn't know the funds could be transferred like that. Tidemark is very efficient. They are the best, Kara chirped, oblivious to the fact that she had just handed me the smoking gun. We are getting married on June 14th. You have to come. Harper, it is going to be stunning. June 14th, I repeated. The Azalea Room, Tidemark Hospitality. Yes, Kara smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. Denise let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. She thought the danger had passed. She thought I was being polite. She thought that because I hadn't started screaming right then and there, I was accepting the narrative. She grabbed Kara's arm gently. Come on, darling. The food. She pulled the girl away, shooting a terrified glance over her shoulder at me. I stayed by the fireplace. Ethan walked over to me. He had heard everything. His jaw was tight. Did you hear that? He whispered. They told her it was a gift. They told her you gave them the credit. I heard, I said. Are you going to do it? He asked. Are you really going to do it? I looked around the room. The tree was twinkling. The fire was crackling. My mother was laughing too loudly at something Mr. Miller said. Nolan was topping off his glass, looking smug, thinking he had survived the close call. They were so comfortable. They were so sure that I was the same Harper I had always been, the quiet one, the fixer, the one who absorbed the damage to keep the family whole. They thought the social pressure of having the Millers there would silence me. They thought the Christmas spirit was a shield. They were wrong. I looked at my brother across the room. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a mock toast, a silent signal that said, "Thanks for not blowing my cover." I smiled back at him. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has just realized the trap is perfectly set. The prey is inside, and the latch is already falling. "Ethan," I said softly, picking up my tote bag from the floor. "Go connect the iPad to the TV." "Now," he asked. "No," I said. "Wait until we are all seated. Wait until the toast. I want them to be holding their glasses when the bill comes due." Dinner was a theatrical production, and my mother was determined to win a Tony Award for Best Actress in a leading role. The dining room table was set with her finest china, the gold-rimmed plates that only came out when she needed to impress someone of significant social standing. The Millers were seated on either side of the table, acting as the audience for this performance of domestic bliss. The air smelled of rosemary, roasted pork, and the expensive, heavy perfume of desperation. I sat next to Ethan, my hands folded in my lap, under the tablecloth. My fingers brushed against the smooth leather of the iPad case I had hidden beneath my napkin. Across from me, Nolan was pouring wine for Kara's father, laughing a little too loudly at a joke about interest rates. He looked confident. He looked like a man who believed the storm had passed because the sky was currently clear. He did not know that a hurricane does not knock before it enters. We were halfway through the main course when Denise made her move. I had been expecting it. She clinked her fork against her crystal wine glass, the sharp sound cutting through the low murmur of conversation. The room fell silent. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, standing up. She smoothed the front of her red velvet dress and beamed at the table. "I know we usually do gifts by the tree later, but I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge something special." She turned her gaze toward me. Her eyes were shimmering with unshed tears, a practiced effect. "My beautiful daughter, Harper," she began, her voice trembling with emotion, "and her wonderful husband, Ethan. I know things were a little chaotic around the wedding. Life has a way of throwing curveballs at us, doesn't it?" She laughed softly, inviting the room to join her in minimizing her betrayal. The Millers smiled politely. "But family is about resilience," Denise continued, "and I wanted to give you something tonight, a little token to help you start your new life together. Just a little sorry for the bumps in the road gift." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. She walked around the table and placed it next to my plate. She leaned down and kissed my cheek. "I love you, sweetie," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room waited. The pressure to perform was immense. I was supposed to open it, gasp, tear up, and hug her. I was supposed to complete the scene she had directed. I picked up the envelope. It was light. I slid my finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a personal check. I looked at the amount, $500. I stared at the number, $500. The venue debt was over $25,000. She had stolen enough to buy a luxury car, and she was trying to buy my silence with the price of a mid-range microwave. It was not just a bribe, it was an insult. It was her way of saying she thought I was cheap. I looked up at her. She was standing by her chair, smiling expectantly, waiting for my gratitude. "Thank you, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and devoid of warmth. "This is very generous." "Oh, it is nothing." She waved her hand. "Just put it toward something fun for the house." "Actually," I said, "I think we should talk about the house finances. Since we are all here." I placed her check on the table. Then, I reached into my tote bag, which was resting by my feet. "You wanted to make things right," I said. "I appreciate that. So, I have something for you too." I pulled out the thick, white envelope with the plastic window. The red stamp on the front, "Final Notice," was visible even in the dim candlelight. I didn't hand it to her gently. I slid it across the polished mahogany table. It spun slightly and stopped directly in front of her plate, right next to the untouched honey-glazed ham. "What is this?" Denise asked. Her smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. "You told me you handled the wedding venue," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the ends of the table. "You said you paid it in full. You said it was a gift." "I did," she said, her eyes darting to the Millers. "I told you. Harper, it is just a mix-up. Why are you doing this now?" "Because this is not a mix-up, Mom," I said. "That is a final demand for payment. The balance is $25,750, and it is due immediately." Nolan, who had been chewing a piece of pork, stopped mid-bite, his eyes locked onto the invoice. He recognized the logo. He recognized the format. He reached out, his hand shaking slightly. "Let me see that," he said, his voice tight. He grabbed the envelope before Denise could stop him. He pulled out the invoice. I watched his face drain of color as he read the line items. "This is crazy," Nolan muttered, trying to laugh, but the sound came out like a choke. "Harper, you are being dramatic. It is just a bill. Mom will write a check on Monday." "Will she?" I asked, because she told me she already wrote a check in September. She even sent me a receipt for it. "Exactly," Denise cried out, seizing the lifeline. "I sent you the receipt. You know I paid it. This is just their incompetent system." "That is the thing about systems," I said. "They leave tracks." I nodded to Ethan. He picked up the remote control for the TV. With a single click, the loop of the crackling fireplace vanished. The screen went black for a second, and then, stark and bright against the festive room, my iPad screen was mirrored in high definition. The first image was the audit log from the venue. It was blown up large enough that even Mrs. Miller, sitting at the far end of the table, could read the text. "What is that?" Kara asked, squinting at the screen. "That," I said, standing up slowly, "is the login history for my wedding contract." I pointed to the screen. "On September 15th, I narrated, my tone professional, like I was presenting to a board of directors. "The contact email for my account was changed. It was changed from my email to Denise, Watson, Savannah Yahoo.com. Denise gasped. "That is a lie, I never did that." "The request came from IP address 98.142.111.20. I continued, ignoring her. "Which, if anyone cares to check the Wi-Fi router in the hallway, is the IP address of this house." The room was deadly silent. Mr. Miller put his fork down. "And here," I said, signaling Ethan to swipe to the next image, "is where the money went." The screen changed. It now displayed the event deposit transfer request. "On the morning of my wedding," I said, looking directly at Nolan, $12,000 was removed from my account. It wasn't refunded. It was transferred. I walked around the table until I was standing behind Kara. She looked up at me. her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Kara," I said gently, "do you see that event ID code at the bottom, the one the money was moved to?" She looked at the screen. EVTSAV 240614 NW. She read aloud. "And do you see the event name listed next to it?" I asked. She read it. Her voice was a whisper. "Nolan Watson and Kara Miller wedding." She froze. She turned her head slowly to look at Nolan. "Nolan," she said, Why is our wedding date on Harper's bill?" Nolan looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "It is a mistake," Denise shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair back. It fell with a loud crash against the hardwood floor. "Turn that off, Harper. Stop this right now. You are humiliating us." "I am not humiliating you," I said. "I am auditing you. You told me you paid for my wedding, but you didn't. You took the money I saved, the money Dad left for me, and you used it to book Nolan's venue. You stole my deposit to secure his date." "I didn't steal it," Denise yelled, her face blotchy and red. I reallocated it. It was family money. Nolan needed it to hold the Azalea Room. We were going to pay it back." "When?" I asked. "Because you sent me a fake receipt 3 days ago." Ethan swiped the screen again. The image of the doctored bank transfer appeared, side by side with the email from the venue manager confirming it was fraudulent. "You photoshopped a bank statement." "Mom," I said, "you committed wire fraud and forgery to hide the fact that you robbed me." Mrs. Miller let out a sharp gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand. Mr. Miller was staring at Nolan with a look of absolute disgust. "It wasn't like that," Nolan suddenly shouted. He slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "You do not understand. I had to put the deposit down or we were going to lose the date Kara really wanted that venue." "Nolan!" Kara cried out, pulling away from him. "You told me you paid for it with your bonus. You told me you earned that money." I was going to," Nolan stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. He turned to me, his eyes wild with panic and rage. "Why are you doing this? You are so selfish. Harper, you have a great job. You have Ethan. You guys are rich. What is 20 grand to you? You are ruining everything over money." "It is not about the money," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly low volume. "It is about the fact that on the day I was getting married, while I was waiting for you to walk me down the aisle, you were filling out a transfer form to take my deposit for yourself. You skipped my wedding to steal from me." "I didn't skip it," Nolan yelled. "Mom told me to handle the transfer. She said it was the only way." "Shut up, Nolan!" Denise hissed. "No, you shut up," Nolan screamed back at her. "You said she wouldn't notice. You said you would fix it before Christmas. Now look what you did. The mask was gone. The perfect family was gone." In the span of 3 minutes, they had turned on each other like rats in a sinking ship. Mr. Miller stood up. He threw his napkin on the table. "Kara," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. "Get your coat." "Daddy, Kara was crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Now," Mr. Miller barked. He looked at Nolan. "Do not ever contact my daughter again. If you come near our house, I will have you arrested for fraud." "Wait, Bob, please," Denise pleaded, reaching out to him. "It is just a family misunderstanding. We can explain." "There is nothing to explain," Mrs. Miller said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. She looked at Denise with pitying disdain. "You people are monsters." The room descended into chaos. Kara was sobbing as her mother ushered her toward the door. Nolan was shouting at Mr. Miller. Denise was crying, clutching the tablecloth. I stood still in the center of the storm. I felt incredibly light. And then, right on cue, my phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. It was the email I had set a timer for. Or rather, the email the venue had agreed to send at exactly 8 in the evening if the account balance was not 0. Subject notice of legal action account 99281. I tapped the screen to open it. I read it aloud. my voice cutting through the shouting. "This is from the Tidemark Legal Department," I announced. The room went quiet again. Nolan stopped yelling. Denise stopped sobbing. "It says," I read, "Dear Ms. Watson, we have not received payment for the outstanding balance of $25,750. Please be advised that if the full amount is not remitted by 9 in the morning on Monday, December 29th, we will proceed with filing a civil lawsuit against the contract holder. We will also be filing a formal complaint regarding the unauthorized access and fraudulent transfer of funds associated with this account." I looked up from the phone. I looked at my mother. I looked at my brother. "The contract holder is me," I said. "But the fraudulent transfer, that is you." I placed the phone on the table next to the invoice. "So," I said, "here is how this is going to end. You are going to write a check for the full amount, right now, tonight, and you are going to sign a document admitting that you accessed my account without permission." I don't have that kind of money, Liquid," Denise whispered, shaking. "Then you better find it," I said, "because if that balance isn't paid by Monday morning, I am not the one who is going to be explaining this to a judge. I have the IP logs, I have the forged signature, and I have the witnesses." I gestured to the empty chairs where the Millers had been sitting just seconds ago. "The clock is ticking," I said. "Merry Christmas." The chaos in the dining room did not explode all at once. It unraveled in a sickening, spiraling motion, like water circling a drain. My mother's dining room, usually a sanctuary of performative perfection, had become a crime scene, and the evidence was glowing on the television screen behind me, while Mr. and Mrs. Miller had marched toward the foyer, determined to remove themselves from the blast radius of our family's implosion. Kara had not followed them immediately. She stood frozen near the archway, her coat half on, her face a mask of smeared mascara and disbelief. She looked at the invoice on the table. She looked at the iPad screen. And then she looked at the man she was planning to marry. "Nolan," Kara said. Her voice was shaking, high and thin. "Tell me she is lying. Tell me you did not pay for the azalea room with her money." Nolan looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the door where the Millers were waiting, then at Denise, and finally at me. He was sweating profusely, the moisture beading on his upper lip. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, hacking sound. "Babe, listen," Nolan stammered, taking a step toward her. "It is complicated. You do not understand how family finances work. It is all one big pot, really. Mom handles the logistics. I just told her we needed the date, and she said she would move some liquidity around." "Liquidity?" Kara screamed. The sound was sharp enough to make Denise flinch. "She stole $25,000 from your sister. That is not liquidity. Nolan, that is theft." "I didn't know," Nolan shouted back, his voice cracking. He spun around to face Denise, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You said you handled it. You said it was from the investment dividends. You told me Harper wouldn't even know." Denise gasped, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. It was a move she had used 1,000 times to deflect blame, but tonight, nobody was buying a ticket to the show. "I was trying to help you. I was trying to give you the wedding you wanted." "By robbing me?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their shouting like a razor blade. Kara stared at Nolan. The adoration I had seen in her eyes earlier that evening was gone, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She didn't look at Nolan. She tapped the screen with aggressive, jerky movements. "Daddy," she said into the phone, her voice loud and clear. "Daddy, wait. Do not bring the car around yet. You need to come back in here. You need to hear this." "Kara, no," Denise cried out, lunging forward as if to grab the phone. "Do not involve them. We can fix this. It is Christmas. We can sit down and work out a payment plan." "There is no payment plan for fraud." "Mrs. Watson," Kara said, stepping back from her. She looked at her phone again. "Yes, Daddy, it is true. All of it. The deposit on the azalea room. It is stolen money. Cancel the contract. Cancel everything. Nolan's face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He realized, in that exact second, that his life was over. The country club membership, the easy job at Mr. Miller's bank, the safety net of marrying into old money, it was all evaporating. Panic overtook him. He looked at the TV screen, where the incriminating transfer request was still displayed. In his mind, if the image disappeared, the truth would disappear with it. He lunged for the iPad sitting on the sideboard. "Turn it off!" Nolan screamed. "Turn it off right now!" He moved fast, his hand outstretched, fingers clawing for the device, but Ethan was faster. My husband stepped in front of the sideboard, blocking Nolan's path with his shoulder. Ethan is a calm man, a man who avoids conflict, but he is also 6'2" and works out to manage his stress. He didn't shove Nolan, he just stood there, solid as a wall. "Do not touch the device, Nolan," Ethan said. His voice was low, devoid of anger, but heavy with warning. "That is evidence." "Get out of my way," Nolan shouted, trying to push past him. "You come into my house and ruin my life. You think you are better than us?" "I think I am not a thief," Ethan said simply. He caught Nolan's wrist as my brother tried to swing at the iPad. He held it there, firmly, until Nolan stopped struggling. "Sit down." Nolan slumped back against the wall, sliding down until he was crouching on the floor, his head in his hands. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. The room was heavy with the sound of ragged breathing. Denise was weeping openly now, loud, ugly sobs that shook her shoulders. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, and her eyes landed on Aunt Linda, who was sitting in the corner, clutching her napkin to her mouth. "Linda," Denise wailed. Tell Harper she is destroying this family on Christmas Eve." "Who does this? Who does this to their own mother?" Aunt Linda looked at me. Her eyes were wide and watery. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who believed that sweeping dirt under the rug made the house clean. "Harper," Linda said, her voice trembling. Maybe this could have been handled privately. Look at your mother. She is distraught. You have made your point. Can't we just put the papers away?" "For tonight?" "Put them away," I repeated. I felt a surge of cold anger. "Linda, did you hear the letter I am being sued? If I do not pay $25,000 by Monday morning, Tidemark Hospitality is taking me to court. My credit will be ruined. My professional reputation will be destroyed. I work in compliance. I audit contracts. If I have a judgment for fraud on my record, I lose my job. Do you understand that?" Linda flinched. "But surely Denise didn't mean for that to happen." "Intent does not matter to the law," I said. "Actions matter." And her actions were criminal. I turned back to my mother. She was still crying, dabbing at her eyes with the linen napkin, ruining it with mascara stains. "Mom," I said. I waited until she looked at me. "I want you to answer one question, and I want you to answer it truthfully, because I already know the answer, and I have the logs to prove it." She sniffled, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Did you log into my venue portal using my email address?" I asked. She started, then stopped. She looked at Nolan, huddled on the floor. She looked at the door where Kara was still standing, phone to her ear. "Did you?" I pressed. "I just wanted to check the balance," she cried. "I didn't mean to lock you out." "And the transfer?" I asked. "Did you fill out the transfer request form?" "Nolan needed the date," she blurted out. The words hung in the air. "He needed the date," she repeated, her voice rising in a desperate pitch. The Azalea Room only had one Saturday left in June. He was going to lose it. He was panicking. "Harper," he called me crying. He said Kara would leave him if he couldn't book it. What was I supposed to do? I am his mother. I had to help him. "So you cannibalized my wedding to save his," I said. "I was going to pay it back," she insisted. "I have an investment maturing in February. I was going to put it all back before anyone noticed. I just needed time." You didn't have time, I said. My bill was due in September. You let my account go into default. You let them threaten me with legal action. You let me stand at the altar with an empty seat because you were too busy securing his venue to attend mine. I did it for the family, she screamed. No, I said. You did it for Nolan. From the doorway, Kara spoke. Her voice was flat. Daddy says he is calling the police if you do not return the engagement ring. Nolan didn't move. He just stared at the floor. Kara turned to me. I am sorry. Harper, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. I believe you, I said. Kara turned and walked out the front door. We heard the heavy oak door slam shut, and then the sound of a car engine starting in the driveway. The Millers were gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. The holiday music was gone. The fire was dying down. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I walked over to the table and picked up the fake receipt Denise had emailed me. I held it up. This is over, I said. I am done playing the good daughter. I am done protecting you. I looked at my watch. It was 9:30 at night. Here is what is going to happen, I said. My voice was steady, the voice of the professional auditor delivering the final report. Tomorrow morning, at 9 o'clock, I am going to the police station to file a report for identity theft. Then, I am faxing a copy of that report, along with these logs and your confession, to the legal department at Tidemark Hospitality. You can't, Denise gasped. Harper, you can't send me to jail. I am your mother. I am not sending you to jail, I said. You sent yourself to jail when you forged my signature, but honestly, Tidemark probably won't press criminal charges if they get their money. They just want the debt settled. I don't have it, Denise wailed. I don't have $25,000 liquid. The markets are down. Then you better find it, I said. Sell the car. Sell the jewelry. Take a second mortgage on this house. I don't care. But if that invoice isn't paid by Monday, I am handing over the evidence. I will not let my credit score die to protect your secrets. You are heartless, Nolan muttered from the floor. You are cold as ice. I am practical, I said. And right now, being practical is the only thing that is going to keep me from being sued for your wedding. I signaled to Ethan. He disconnected the iPad. The TV screen went black, plunging the room into shadow. We are leaving, I said. We are going to a hotel. I can't sleep under this roof. Harper, please, Denise whispered. She stood up, her hands trembling. She looked small now. The grand matriarch facade had crumbled, leaving behind a terrified, aging woman who had gambled everything on the wrong child. Do not go. We can fix this. We can find a way. There is no we anymore. Mom, I said. There is just me, and there is you. I picked up my bag. Ethan took my hand. We turned to walk toward the door. It wasn't your money anyway, Denise said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it stopped me dead in my tracks. I turned around slowly. Excuse me? Denise wiped her face. She stood up straighter, a sudden, strange defiance returning to her eyes. It was the look of a cornered animal that has one final, desperate bite left. The money, she said, her voice gaining strength. The $25,000. You keep acting like you earned it, like you scrubbed floors for it. She took a step toward me. That money came from the trust your father left, she said. He left it for educational purposes. You used your share for grad school. You used it all up. Harper, the money that was in that account, the money I promised you for the venue, that was the remainder of the family fund? She paused, a cruel smile touching her lips. It was technically Nolan's share, she said. He never finished college. He never used his portion. So when I moved it, I was just putting it back where it belonged. I was just redistributing it, to be fair. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting history in real time. She was trying to tell me that the money she had explicitly gifted me, the money she had called a wedding present for months, was actually Nolan's birthright all along. You told me, I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of rage, that Dad left a specific account for my wedding, You showed me the statement. I lied, she said simply. I wanted you to feel special. But deep down, that money was Nolan's. And he needed it. So I took it back. I didn't steal from you. Harper, I just corrected an accounting error. She crossed her arms. So go ahead, she said. Call the police. Tell them I moved my own son's trust fund to pay for his wedding. See how far that gets you. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, and I realized that she didn't just love Nolan more. She despised me for succeeding without her help. She hated that I didn't need her money, so she had to invent a narrative where I was stealing his. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out the one document I hadn't shown them yet. I thought you might say that, I said. I held the document in my hand. It was a single sheet of paper, yellowed slightly at the edges, encased in a protective plastic sleeve. It was not a printout from a bank. It was a photocopy of the distribution schedule from my father's estate, dated 5 years ago. You really want to play the history game, Mom? I asked. My voice was low, vibrating with a calm that terrified me even as I felt it. You want to talk about Dad's intentions? Denise stared at the paper. Her defiance flickered, replaced by the instinctual fear of a liar who knows the truth has just entered the room. Put that away, she hissed. This is private family business. It is, I agreed. And that is why I read it. Every line. Dad was a meticulous man. He didn't just leave a pot of money for you to dip into whenever Nolan wanted a new toy. He created specific subledgers. I placed the document on the table, right on top of the fake receipt she had forged. Clause 4, Section B. I recited from memory, tapping the paragraph with my index finger. Funds allocated to Harper Watson are to be held in trust for education, home purchase, or wedding expenses. Any remaining funds are to be distributed to her directly upon her 30th birthday. I looked at Nolan, who was still slumped on the floor, and then back at my mother. Nolan had his own education fund, I said. He spent it on 3 different semesters at 3 different colleges he dropped out of. He spent his startup capital on that failed crypto venture. Dad knew this would happen. That is why he separated our accounts. He explicitly forbade commingling the assets. Denise's face went ash gray. The narrative she had constructed that she was just a benevolent mother redistributing wealth for fairness had just been dismantled by the ghost of her dead husband. You didn't reallocate family money, I said. You embezzled from a restricted trust, and since you are the trustee, that is not just a civil dispute. That is a breach of fiduciary duty. That is a crime. The room was silent. The only sound was the wind rattling the window panes, a cold draft seeping into the warmth of the Christmas illusion. So, I continued, here is the new reality. I am not just asking for the $25,000 anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out a fresh folder. This was the demand letter I had drafted with my lawyer, the one I had hoped I wouldn't have to use, but knew I would. This is a formal demand letter, I said, sliding it across the mahogany table. It outlines the total amount due. It includes the original $25,750 owed to the venue. It includes the $1,200 in late fees that have accrued because of your delay. And it includes $500 for my legal consultation fees. Legal fees, Nolan scoffed from the floor, though his voice lacked its usual arrogance. You are charging us for your lawyer. I am charging you for the cost of cleaning up your mess, I said. The total is $27,450, and I need it in the form of a cashier's check or a confirmed wire transfer by 9 o'clock Monday morning. We do not have it, Denise cried out, tears streaming down her face again. I told you. The markets are down. I can't liquidate that much cash in 2 days. Then you better start calling your friends, I said. Or maybe you can ask the Millers for a loan. Oh, wait, you can't. As if on cue, Nolan's phone buzzed where it had fallen on the rug. He picked it up. He stared at the screen for a long time. It is Kara, he whispered. What does she say? Denise asked. her voice trembling with a sliver of hope. Nolan looked up. His eyes were hollow. She says the engagement is off. She says her dad already called the bank. They are freezing my access to the client accounts I manage. I am fired. Mom, I am fired effective immediately. Denise let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. No, they can't do that. It is Christmas. They can, I said. Because fraud is a breach of contract in banking too. It seems word travels fast. This is your fault, Nolan suddenly roared. Scrambling to his feet, he lunged toward the table, his face twisted in hate. You did this. You couldn't just keep your mouth shut. You had to ruin everything. You destroyed this family over a stupid bill. Ethan stepped forward, but I held up a hand to stop him. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, looking my brother in the eye. I didn't destroy this family. Nolan, I said. You did. You destroyed it the moment you decided that my wedding day was just an opportunity for you to rob me. You destroyed it when you let our mother take the fall for your entitlement. We are family, he screamed. Family helps each other. Family is not a place where people take my name to sign their debts. I said. My voice was clear, sharp, and final. And I am done financing your life with my dignity. I turned to Denise. She was weeping into her hands, broken and small. I have one more document, I said. I pulled out the affidavit from the venue. It was a simple one-page statement. It confirmed that the user Denise Watson had accessed the account and requested the transfer. I spoke to the legal department at Tidemark Hospitality this morning. I lied. It was a partial lie. I had spoken to them yesterday, but the timing made it more effective. They are invoking the fraud indemnification clause in the contract. That means that because the access was unauthorized, the liability shifts from the contract holder me to the individual who committed the unauthorized access you. I placed the paper in front of her. Next to it, I placed a pen. If you sign this, I said, you are admitting that you made the transfer without my permission. Once you sign it, I will send it to the venue. They will transfer the debt officially to your name. They will stop coming after me. They will come after you. And if I don't sign it, she whispered, then I pay the bill myself, I said. And then I sue you for every penny, plus damages, plus pain and suffering, and I will file a police report for identity theft. And unlike a private debt collection, a criminal record is public. All your friends at the club will know. The Millers will know for sure. You will be a pariah in this town. Denise looked at the pen. She looked at the opulent dining room she had curated so carefully to impress people who now despised her. She realized she had no moves left. The game was over. If I sign, she said, her voice shaking, will you still come for Easter? I looked at her, even now, at the bitter end. She was trying to negotiate the appearance of a relationship. Sign the paper. Mom, I said. She picked up the pen. Her hand was trembling so badly she could barely hold it. She signed her name, Denise Watson. And the check, I said. I know you have a liquidity line of credit on the house. You bragged about it last Thanksgiving. Write the check. She stood up slowly, like an old woman. She walked to the sideboard where her purse was. She pulled out her checkbook. She wrote the check for $27,450. She handed it to me. She didn't look me in the eye. Take it, she whispered, and go. I took the check. I took the signed affidavit. I took my iPad. I will be confirming this with the bank on Monday morning, I said. If it bounces, the police report gets filed by noon. I walked over to the TV and unplugged my cable. The screen went dark, erasing the evidence of their betrayal, but the stain of it would remain in this room forever. Come on, Ethan, I said. We walked to the front door. We put on our coats in silence. The house was quiet now. No music, no laughter, just the sound of a family that had finally broken under the weight of its own lies. I opened the front door. The cool night air hit my face, crisp and clean. I walked out onto the porch. The inflatable Santa on the lawn was swaying gently in the breeze. The street was lined with cars, neighbors having their own parties, living their own lives. I stood there for a moment, clutching the folder to my chest. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was just relief. The heavy, suffocating blanket of obligation had been lifted. Ethan stepped up beside me. He put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. "You did it," he said softly. "You won." I looked back at the house. Through the window, I could see my mother sitting alone at the head of the long, empty table, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect Christmas. Nolan was gone, likely retreated to his room to wallow in his collapsed future. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I didn't win anything, Ethan. I just stopped letting them win by using my name." I turned away from the house. I walked down the steps, my boots clicking on the pavement. I didn't look back. I had closed the audit. The account was settled, and for the first time in my life, my ledger was clean. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Harper, but she finally got the justice she deserved. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your kitchen, your car, or maybe winding down in bed? Let me know in the comments below so we can share this moment together. If you enjoyed Harper's story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to see that standing up for yourself is always worth it. See you in the next story.